Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I am your host, Teri Wellbrock, and thrilled to have with me today Heather Ferri. And I'm going to do the introduction of author, international speaker, and coach specializing in healing pain. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just told you I was stalking your website. And everyone, if you get a chance, go to Heather's website, and I'll put the link on the video, and we'll share it here on audio as well. But yeah, check out her. I think it's like 3 minutes and 11 seconds. It's a short little video, but powerful. And I told her, I said I smiled through the whole thing because I love her. I love her energy and the joy that she emits. So yeah, be sure to check it out.
I love that feedback. Thank you. It always feels awkward when you make videos, you never quite know what to say to people. And so thanks.
Right. I know I've been thinking about doing a Facebook Live for the first time, but I keep procrastinating on it because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do the whole live thing.
Oh, I think you can do it. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you.
I'll be on with you.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds wonderful. So talk to us about the healing work that you're doing and shining that light of hope into the world.
Well, I wrote a book, as you know, Victim to Victory, Healing Generational Abuse Through the Bloodline. And that took me about 7 years to write. I was actually sick for 7 years. Chronic pain, cancer, PTSD. And I always tell people that was sort of my education on trauma and pain. And God led through that journey. I was, just told to start writing my story out, and published my book last year with Christian Faith Publishing. And it was daunting and a little scary to put my soul out into the world, especially because I spent most of my life with masks, which I think people can relate to, and lies. I mean, not bad lies, but lies of who I was. I came across like everything's fine when internally everything wasn't fine. And, but now it's getting more comfortable to share my story in the book. And really that is sort of allowing people to understand how God led me into being a trauma coach, helping heal pain. And I've had a practice for over a decade now. And it's very rewarding. I feel I'm on a mission now that I'm healthy, and I really want to bring these two sciences that do have clinical studies and research, either to a clinic that I create. It starts in Pittsburgh, or I partner with people. So I'm in that transition of going from a private practice to how do I, which is wonderful to be on here today, start conversations with people about making this bigger and training more people, getting these sciences more accessible to people that maybe don't research PubMed or don't know anything about me, right?
Right. Yeah. And the first thing that popped in my head was, wow, I so relate. I'm finishing up a book manuscript, and I feel like I've been writing it for, decades. But yes, the past 3 years have just been, I keep telling people, I even have a Facebook page dedicated to it. And I keep telling them, I promise it's going to be out soon. But that it is so hard to put your soul out there and to put your truth out there. And even not so much, it's just honoring my own worthiness kind of thing, and me continuing to heal that part of me.
Absolutely. And I tell people I was the same way. I told people for several years, the book's coming. And exactly. So I resonate with that. And it really, when you're writing a book with the intention of serving because what you feel is your purpose here on earth, then it really is a conversation, and it's an awareness of aligning with the universe. And so I think that the timing was divine for me. There's steps in evolving, and when we speed up that process when we're not ready for it, we just hide, so it really does come out when it needs to come out, and you grow when you need to grow. So when people come to me and they say, I'm going to write a book in a month, I'm like, is that your ego that wants to write the book in the month, or what is the book about? and a lot of people, I don't claim to be a writer. When I started the process 7 years ago, my English was horrible. And God led clients would come in that were editors and they would just help me and read it and teach me. And it was all a process. But I do believe that following and working with what I would call something higher than yourself is the best way to go. Because when you force things, and I was really good at that in my book. I talk about that. I'm really good at forcing things and then they don't turn out what they need to be. I either don't get the lesson, I either cause myself more pain emotionally.
Yes.
But when I learn to surrender and meditate and breathe and listen and go slower like warrior, then it's like, oh, and it's been nice because a lot of people who have read it, people who are literal, literature and degrees with, PhDs and blah, blah, they're like, this is a really, well-written book and this has got some meat to it. And that makes me feel good because it was hard for me. It wasn't an easy process.
Right.
So I feel like if I can do it, anyone can really do it.
Yeah, congratulations. And again, I send you kudos for doing it. I think it's amazing. And I just want to share really quick because I think you bringing up faith in God and the universe and just the way listening to that. I had a friend reach out to me, and this was years ago, and she said, hey, your dad, and my dad was passed. Your dad gave me a message that there's a message in the blue book for you. And I was like, a message in the blue book? Well, my dad had hundreds of books and he wrote like on every page of every one of them. And I was, how am I ever going to find the message in the blue book? Well, oh my gosh, how is that going to work? Well, I dug through things, like shaking it out, hoping a little piece of paper would fall out, like, hey, Teri, it's Dad from the afterworld, And so I said, after I gave up and I said, you know what, that message will come to me when it's meant to come to me. And about a year later, I was sitting here writing my book and feeling very frustrated. And I looked over at the shelf next to me and I said, well, what is that blue book? And it was behind like pictures and knickknacks. And I pulled it out. And it was my dad's Bible. He was in the seminary for 8 years. And it was his New Testament. And it was old, beat up, just a solid blue cover. And I said, oh my gosh, he is going to have written in this like crazy. How am I ever going to find the message in the blue book? So I started flipping through the pages. And he wrote on one page. And I blew it up. Hold on, I'm going to stand up for a second.
Oh, I love this.
Hold on, I blew it up and then I copied his words and he wrote, my ability to write, what am I doing with it? And that was it in my dad's handwriting. And so I have it hanging in my office here.
Oh my gosh.
And it was the message in the blue book. And I got it a year later and I said, all right, thanks God. That was the answer that I was praying for. So I know what I need to do. So there you go.
That is a beautiful story. I talk about that in my book when I'm starting my 20s in New York City, and I'm a mess and I'm running in circles and I'm angry and I've got some brain damage from childhood abuse and I'm not thinking straight, but there was something inside of me. It's always inside of me that was afraid of the unknown, afraid of God or whatever, people believe in, something divine, something higher, but I always was reaching and asking questions at the same time. It was this dance. And I was always, when I would ask the question or ask for help, it didn't come in the way that I thought it would come, but it always came and led me to the next healing path and journey. And that was one of the things that people commented on, was my ability to trust, like literally trust and not realize it when I had no reason to. A lot of people had sort of disappointed me and abandoned me early in my life, but yet I somehow trusted something. And then obviously that grew with experience and experience and experience, but it's a muscle sometimes for people.
Yes. Yeah, very much. Beautiful. So what is your story? Do you mind sharing it with us?
I don't mind at all. I mean, There's a lot to my story, but the cliff notes are I grew up in an all-American family, like I think most people. My parents met in high school sweethearts. They both come from trauma. They didn't do any therapy or trauma, healing work. They just married, had kids, me and my brother, and they they carried out that trauma in a lot of dysfunctional ways within the family system. But my mother switched mental states when I was 8 and began to come into my room in the morning and attack and choke me every day.
Oh my goodness.
And this was a repetitive pattern, so it was chronic. And it was an extreme situation because for the most part, she was just an average, woman, beautiful, and she had problems, and she definitely didn't know how to deal with her problems with her husband and the family and drama. But this goes deeper, this goes really deep when she would switch a button and not be her, not be so as a child, obviously, I suffered from a lot of health issues that were never really diagnosed because I never talked about anything and nobody knew what was going on because nobody was present. And I suffered in the sense that eventually I was just so congested all the time and medicated all the time that there was a part of me that was dying. I wouldn't say dead, but dying.
Right.
And very robotic. And I turned very early on to dancing and show business, partly because she loved to dance, and watching my parents go out on the weekends dancing seemed to bring her joy. And so as a young child, I thought, well, if I dance, my mom will be happy and she'll love me. You know what I mean? So I did it, and it was a good outlet. It was a healthy outlet. And that creative arts definitely plays a role in me today. But there was also a part of me that was very lost. There was a part of me that in my teenage years didn't get to form my own identity or have a voice or opinion about anything.
Yeah.
So those are the cliff notes, of the family system growing up. I had a great brother. We were best friends. He was my angel. My mom, was very aggressive and angry all the time, verbally, energetically, even though she was a stunning woman. She just didn't have the tools, and it's generational abuse. So my grandmother, it's carried down through the lineage of. And when I started to really study, because I think I was searching for the why. We always want to know why.
Right.
Why? Like, why is she bipolar? Is she that? I'm trying to diagnose my mom. Why? And as I studied generational abuse, it was extremely fascinating, the research of the brain and the clinic, like the wiring we do. And literally a lot of generational abuse, it literally happens on the same day, the same time, it's just fascinating when we study people like Hitler and Saddam Hussein and all those things. We now understand that if we can rewire this, which is what I do for a living now, we don't have to carry on this generational abuse pattern. And part of that journey, and it was a long journey, and I write about it in my book, the healers and the rewiring. I had to spend lots of years. Part of that journey really made me see, like, it wasn't my mom that was doing the choking. It wasn't really her soul. I believe every soul comes into this earth with light and love.
Yes.
It was really the wiring that got messed up and was in her environment that taught her and triggered her to start behaving in a way that was outside, literally, of her being. Yeah. And that's really huge for people to understand, because you can be a victim all your life and never leave that victimization hood. Or you can see why these, and that's the thing that shocks people when they read my books. I've had a lot of hardships, had a lot of hard things happen in my life. I've had a lot of challenging situations. And I always say my parents were my greatest teacher. You can't learn what I know in a book, because they were masterful at being lower conscious, not having tools. and they acted this out, and so it gave me a lot of practical practice of how do we heal this.
Yeah, powerful and amazing. And I mean, again, 500 thoughts popped into my head because
Which one do you want to pick?
oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, and I think, but my mom is an alcoholic and she's now 4 months sober at 83, which is fantastic that she finally was able to do it. But I remember being in the hospital just, maybe 9 months ago in the past year, and standing at the foot of the bed and saying to her, Mom, oh, this was in March. I said, how come every March, this in April, that time, I said, did something happen to you as a child? Like, did something, her brother died when she was, he was 2 years old and she was 4. I said, when did Bobby die? Like, I was just trying to grasp at straws because I knew there has to be a correlation. There has to be a correlation. And the other thing was brain plasticity. I love it. I love the fact that you're talking about rewiring because it's true, changing habitual patterns. That was huge for me on overcoming my symptoms of CPTSD. So
yes, I have a couple. So that's great. So I was a sugar addict. Sugar is a very serious addiction. It's equated to cocaine in the brain. A lot of people don't realize that. My mother was a sugar addict. She would buy a birthday cake and eat it in the morning. And literally it's been used to numb our pain, our emotional pain.
right.
Really, a lot of disease is a connection to a lot of emotional mental pain. So addiction, I really feel, and there's some doctors who have left the system and sort of are outside the box also agree that the root of addiction is trauma. And if you don't heal the trauma, the addiction comes back. And so a lot of my clients now, we go and finding the root is hard because the brain, so there were moments in my life I had amnesia. And I talk about that in my book, and then I go and do some healing work, and then the memories come up, and then you have to decide, am I going to allow myself to deal? Because I'm not 8 years old anymore.
Right.
Or am I going to close that button again? Close that door. And so it's fascinating when you do the rewiring brain work, the memories that come up, not only in the mind, but in the body.
Oh.
People's sensations in their body. And so when you're rewiring, and what I mean by rewiring is I am a certified Kundalini Yoga teacher, but in that department, there is psychiatric brain protocols. And a lot of people aren't utilizing them in the United States. I came into them over a decade ago, partly because God was bringing me medical clients, doctors who had massive strokes. Now, they were just coming to me because PubMed, Kundalini Yoga has PubMed research. But as I was doing the basic meditations, I was like, they need something else. And so I'm a researcher. I find answers, And so I started to see this whole library that we're not really taught in the mainstream training. And I started to study that. And I started to say, well, they had a massive stroke and it's affecting the cerebellum. So if I do a brain protocol, even if they don't have OCD, which a lot of them had certain mental, emotional issues, a lot of anger with stroke, which was really interesting, and not being able to process anger. So then I would use that brain protocol, and all of a sudden, the mechanisms of using their hand and it would work. And so that's where I fell into starting to study the brain protocols and using them for all types of things. Now I'm intuitive and I work with, I call the Holy Spirit, and some people believe in that and some people don't, and that's cool.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. So I work with the Holy Spirit. So it becomes a little customization, but the brain protocols I want to share, the PTSD, which is phenomenal, the OCD, which is phenomenal. We have childhood trauma, psychic brain protocol, and we have an addiction brain protocol. Those are the 4 I work with. There are a ton more, but those are the 4 that I specialize in. They all have PubMed research. They have enough science to be covered by insurance, but we're in this paradigm shift. We're you know what I mean? But they're science, and yet they're very fascinating because the rewiring is different finger placements, different mouth placements, breath patterns, vowel sounds. We call it chanting, Sanskrit, which is universal vowel sounds.
Yeah.
That sometimes the education of that gets mixed up. Like, are we chanting some god or, and it's like, actually, no, it's science, neurological. You have 84 meridians in your tongue. Your tongue is your subconscious brain. So when you're moving it in different formulas, you're working on an area of the brain and rewiring. So literally when you're working with a client, they may be saying, like Sat Nam, Sat means truth and Nam is your identity. They may be saying that almost all of a sudden they can't say it because they're rewiring. And they're like, whoa. Now, like, it's cool, right? It's really cool, like, that you can do that. So that's one of the sciences. And then the second came to me about 6 years ago. A yoga student came to me and she gave me some water in a glass, like a jug. And I used to drink bottled water. I used to drink, I actually didn't drink a lot of liquids, to be honest with you. I remember taking a nutrition class and the nutrition was like, where's your liquids? I was like, right. I don't know. Like, I'm dehydrated. Like, I'm apparently really acidic and dehydrated, which I was. I was in fight flight mode at the time. So she gave me this just water, and for some reason I jugged it. Like, it didn't sit in my belly, and I was like, oh, that was good. And she came back next week, brought me some, and I was like, what is this water? And she mentioned a Japanese medical device, cancer, and water, and I was like, I need to pay attention to that. I was like, I want to learn. So I started researching and drinking this water. And long story short, I've gotten a lot of doctors in the United States educated and utilizing what Japan's hospitals have been using for 44 years, which is these medical devices with 7 types of waters and pH that do all types of healing.
That's so cool. See,
yeah.
Again, I find this kind of stuff because I'm a researcher as well. I did EMDR therapy for 4 years and we did some brain spotting as well. And, and so when you talk about the memories coming up and the body memories, but then I've looked at Ho'oponopono, Hawaiian healing, and I've looked at EFT tapping, and I love all of the stuff because, again, and this is just fascinating to me, and my mind wants to learn more. Yeah.
Of course. And what I've done, so your brain is mostly water to begin with. It's really interesting when they have healing water. And this water is healing for 24 hours. That's why Japan never bottled it. They made smaller devices after 20 years of it being in hospitalizations. And it's really interesting to watch somebody with a massive stroke and tremors on the right side of their body drink the water for 6 weeks and not have any of that. Like that, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm a very trial-based person. Like and I'm an example of it because I had an enormous amount of trauma. So that was fascinating to me, to really just see the results. But with my clients recently, I keep notes. I ask them, what are all the things you've done? And I don't want to disregard that science, but I want to know. And it's usually all the same things. And so that's how I feel very confident about the brain protocols and the water being a foundation for new mental health. And when I think of addiction, when they go to these rehab centers, what are they drinking? Most water, tap water in the United States has a ton of chemicals in it. That's just a fact. So are you really detoxing them? Or are you just giving them another, you know what I mean? So that chemicalization, I don't think we've taken seriously enough. I mean, I was a big pioneer in Pittsburgh for the last 6 years about that because our tap water, we have no regulations and we have a cancer epidemic growing. And everybody's looking at me like, no, yeah, it's just water's just water. And now this year, literally in the paper, they're saying our water has cancer-causing properties. And I'm like, I've been trying to tell you all. I'm like, just please read. I mean, we are mostly water, and people go, well, your skin's so clear and you look healthier, you look younger. I'm like, because I'm actually doing something. It's like, so that gets a little frustrating when you're a pioneer because you're just like, come on, read the science, experiment. That's all I'm asking you to do. So I'm really, really passionate, as you could probably tell, because my clients, within 3 to 6 months, and it's a lot of, I require them to do the homework. It's a team effort. So they have to do 45 minutes to an hour, 5 days a week of these programs, and we add on. But a lot of them, they've hit rock bottom, or they're just tired of what you just said, things not getting completely cleared. And at the end, if you go to healingpain.solutions, which is a new website I have up, some of the testimonies, I mean, people are like, I am completely different now. And it hasn't come back. It's completely different, you know what I mean? And it hasn't come back. And if it does come back, if I have some trauma, people who are in car accidents, they know exactly what to do to pull the trauma out, because I teach people how to be their own healer. So you have the toolkit for the rest of your life, and you have it for your family, so that when your kids, something as simple as a car accident, somebody hits you behind in the back fender, your body goes into a reaction, even if it's a small one.
Right.
And if you don't release that in your tissues, and there's technique to do that simply, it's a Peter Levine, if you've heard of Peter Levine, then you store it. And then that storing blocks meridians and pathways. And then all of a sudden you wonder why you're having anxiety attacks a year later.
Right.
And so for me, when people come on board, I'm always asking the strangest questions about their past, because I'm a detective. I want to know what triggered or what got them to here to get them out of it. You know what I mean? It's like a puzzle.
Yes.
And everybody's different, because everybody obviously has different personalities, different astrology charts, different numerology numbers. So in Kundalini Yoga, when somebody comes in and I get their birthday, I can do all their Kundalini, numerology. And if people believe that, great. And if they don't, it just helps me have more information to go, oh, this is why this person has trouble meditating. They have this in their chart, and that's what they got. Or this person needs breath work extensively. That the breath work is going to help them move forward.
Yeah. Well, again, it's fascinating to me, and I think we, as a society, humanity, we're starting to get it. We're starting to understand the energy part of it, which is a lot of what you're talking about. Yeah. And well, the stored negative energy, I had severe panic attacks for 25 years. And finally realized it was those ACEs, those adverse childhood experiences, those traumatic events in my childhood, those first 22 years of life that were stored away. And they couldn't get out. I hadn't processed that trauma. I hadn't released it, like you talked about. And, it released itself through panic attacks. And so, yeah, the healing work is just amazing to be able to allow people to process it and rewire. Yeah, very cool.
It is cool. And we have a lot of new neurological science coming out, I think, to support this new movement. And I think our medical system will eventually be trained differently, more trauma informed. Yeah. And I really feel it's the young generation we want to get on track, so that we can just stop the patterns.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
So how do people get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me usually if they go on one of my websites. So I have heatherferri.com, and then I have healingpain.solutions. That website I created in August out of a need that if people couldn't really afford to do a package 101, that there's online programs. So I used the 3 programs that I've used the most when people first come to me. I thought, okay, if people come to me, what do I do? The first 8 weeks, I usually do the same thing for everybody. Right. So if they do these programs, they're going to, implement. And so one of them is just a really simple 15-minute program with 3 exercises. One is a meditation that went to Congress to prove it reverses memory loss. But memory loss, obviously, also working on the frontal cortex of the brain, is so important for mental fogness. So it was like, I just picked like really important ones. So that one, and then the OCD brain protocol is the anxiety program. And then the PTSD is the resilience program. And those 2 I've done personally and just can't say enough about. Right. So people can either go on the site and email me at heatherferryofficial@gmail.com, or that's usually the best way people start the conversation.
Awesome. And Ferri is Ferri.
It is, yes.
For the audio listeners.
Right. Not the other one, Ferri. Flying around.
Which on your book cover, are those angels? What is that?
They are angels.
They are angels. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And my niece did the book cover actually.
Oh.
And and I've had a lot of angels in my life. It's a symbolic thing. And then it's kind of my nickname now. People a lot of times call me Angel. So.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I'm surrounded by them. I have angel paintings. If you could see the rest of it, I have angel knickknacks all over. And yeah, I love it. And I think they're very present in my life as well. And I walked in somewhere once and a medium was there, and he said, I have never seen anyone walk in surrounded by so many angels. And it made me feel so good, because at that time I was feeling very unsafe. And and I thought, oh, that's kind of a relief. So thanks for that.
Yeah. And what I try to tell people in the beginning, because I was a skeptic of everything, I think that's also what makes me relatable to people when they read my book is I came from hard roots, so I was a skeptic. And I remember my teacher telling me that, you have to talk to your angels and ask for help. And if you don't, they're just kind of hanging out, sitting there waiting for you to ask. And asking was a foreign concept to me, from all the abuse I endured psychologically. The concept of asking, especially something that I can't see, for assistance or guidance or help. So being creative, I kind of looked at it as a acting game. It was almost like, oh, we'll see, and I would do it. And then just little signs would come up and I'd be like, really? And so I share to people who are listening out there, if you've never done it, explore it. There's no wrong way of talking to them, and nobody has to know. You know what I mean? It's a private thing, but you might be surprised at even how much better you feel inside.
Yeah.
Because as human beings, we of course we want to help each other, but we're all imperfect. We all have troubles and problems, but that side, that realm is magical and mystical. And it took me a long time to believe in miracles. I had a miracle healing. It's in the book. I've given miracle healings to people through the channel. And once you start opening that door, life becomes more of an adventure.
Yes, I agree. And once you open that door, it's just, again, it's beautiful. And just, again, miracles happen. And yeah, I believe as well. So there you go. All right. So I have to ask you one of my favorite questions. If you could meet anyone in the world, dead or alive, to help you with your continued journey, who would it be?
I don't even have to hesitate. It would be Oprah. I talk about Oprah's show a little bit in my book. Over 20 years ago, when I was in New York City, 24, I was like 24 at the time. Her show dealt with childhood abuse. She had a couple authors on that I remember to this day. David Poutzer, A Child Called It, was one of them.
Yes.
And it was, I don't know if I would have even known I was abused, because I was that blocked. You grow up in an environment, you think that that's just normal.
Right.
You hide shame. So watching that show was my wake-up call. And then since then, knowing who she is at this moment, I really want her to know these two sciences, and I want her to speak to my clients and try to help facilitate, because I know that she's on a path, she's on a mission with not only childhood abuse, but sexual abuse is quite complicated to rewire.
Yeah.
So and somebody, it's funny, 2 months ago, somebody asked me that question, but they asked 3 people and I couldn't name anyone else. It was just her.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And yes, I love what she's doing. She did an interview in 2018 with Dr. Bruce Perry on 60 Minutes about, adverse childhood experience. Right. Since then, it just exploded onto the mental health scene. And amazing how many people are just coming forward, acknowledging and understanding the impact of these experiences on their life. That they thought, like you said, I remember my sister and I talking about, we just thought that was normal to be in this kind of a family environment. And then once we understood the impact that that had on us, it shifted everything. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Anything you want to touch on? One of my questions is any myths or facts that you would like to clarify for listeners?
I guess the only myth is that with the Kundalini Yoga, that it's not a religion, that there's a lot of PubMed science. It's being utilized in the hospitals outside of the United States. San Diego utilized Kundalini Yoga OCD brain protocol with cancer patients, which I think is fascinating. Because once again, there's a psychology behind disease, a rewiring behind disease that needs to happen. So I think that would be the first thing, to stay open-minded, that it's important for you to ask your teacher, what am I chanting? What does this mean? And why am I doing it? But to listen to the answer, to do your due diligence and really understand that. I would say that that's one myth. Yeah.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Kundalini yoga.
All right.
And it's the highest form of yoga. So there's over a couple thousand yoga sets. So if you're a diabetic, there's a set for that. If you have liver issues, there's a set for that. So it's already very sciencey, medical based, but it requires breath patterns, postures, chanting. It's a mixture of all kinds of things happening at once. And I like to inform this, especially in the United States. We have 22 forms of yoga, but we have over 200 yogas in the United States. So what you're studying may not actually be yoga. And that's important as far as medical science taking yoga seriously. We want the yogas that actually are yogas and have science and structure to be valued, and so a lot of times people will go to a class and it's called a yoga class at a gym, and I'm not trying to knock it, and then they leave because they're like, oh, that's not for me, or I can't do that. But that wasn't even a yoga class. If you're not studying at least 10 to 15 minutes of breath work, you're probably not studying yoga. So pranayama, breath work, is what changes our oxygen levels. So you need a certain amount of oxygen to the brain. Most people in the United States are only getting about 6% oxygen to the brain. You need about 20 to actually feel good. So even just like simple breathing exercises, which I think last year was the first year that they started to incorporate within the nurse education. But I have a lot of medical people that have come to me in the last decade, and I love them. I have doctors on my team. I have doctors as private clients, psychiatrists. I love them, but their education is limited, and they know that right now.
Right.
Their hands are tied right now. It's not that they don't want to help people. It's that the system has kind of tied their hands. And, but they don't know much about breath work, breathing. And so they don't breathe very well, which is fascinating to me, because when you breathe really well, if you do 15 to 20 minutes of breath a day, asthma, allergies, minor depression can really be relieved. And that's something it's free once you learn it. It's like, it's given to you. So yeah, just to really, whatever state you're in, country, to look up. I'm biased. I'm really a big fan of Kundalini Yoga. I studied Hatha. It's great. Vinyasa is great. They're great techniques. But if you want something more medical based, that's the one you're going to want to look into.
Wonderful. I don't know enough about it. And what popped into my head was I watched a Dr. Wayne Dyer video on YouTube for about a year, and it was about manifestation, and it was about opening, aligning chakras, and it was making the sound of ah. And I would walk around the rest of the day, and I remember telling a therapist friend of mine, I feel like my forehead is glowing, like I'm radiating something. She was like, oh, that's your third eye. And I was like, again, I was skeptical and like, oh my gosh, it's so crazy. But I felt so aligned and open. And oh my gosh, I have to get back and go do that again because I just found it very
Yeah,
sensitive.
that is such a great point, because one of the things I am masterful and love is the fifth chakra, the seat of the soul, the voice. And most people are blocked here, which affects all the other chakras. So I teach them not only these chants, but I teach them the right technique to actually stimulate the thyroid, the thymus, the pituitary, and pineal. And a lot of people have different hangups about that idea of using their voice. They have a lot of grinding the teeth tension here, but in the end, their voice changes the vibration so they can manifest something like that. Their relationships get better. They're not holding the baggage. So partly the way you talk, that's why in Yogi Bhajan, my master's, he wasn't a big fan of talking the story, because you can talk it in the brain, holding it in. He was about rewiring the story. So to me, that's really fascinating. And when I'm working with clients, sometimes if there are talkers and they want to talk all the time, I'll have them record the session and I'll be like, listen to yourself talking. Have you ever listened to yourself talking? And they start to notice, wow, I talk really, this way or that way. And my mom says that. And I can't believe I just said that to you, and you start to understand your verbiage so that you can rewire it. So vocal therapy is huge for a lot of people. They're afraid of it because nobody's teaching it. But yet when they start to chant and sing, in a sense, and that singing can go into what you're doing at church too, it's a healing tool. There's science. Your voice affects red blood cells. So if you can use your voice too properly, it's healing you. See, God gave us everything that we're capable of doing to keep this all in balance.
Yeah. Oh, I love it all. So cool. Amazing, fascinating, beautiful. I'll give you a bunch of adjectives for it. So.
Well, it's so nice. Thank you for being open to listening to my, my world. And
Yes. Well, again, I believe in so much of it, and I just think what you're doing is amazing, and I thank you for it. Yeah, it's great.
And I thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, being a medium.
Thank you. Well, is there anything more that you wanted to touch on that we didn't have an opportunity to discuss?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. Well, again, thank you for joining me today and sharing your passions and for shining the light of hope and radiating your beautiful energy.
Thank you so much. And I hope everybody out there who's listening has a blessed day.
Oh, thank you. Everyone, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye.